Welcome back to the History Hound Presents in association with CHOP FM, Pickering College. My name is Richard McLeod, and today we will look at Newmarket's World War II Army Camp. A lot of people aren't aware that we had a military camp here in Newmarket, and today I want to take a look at how the camp came to be set up in Newmarket. I want to take a look at the development that happened in Newmarket during the war years when we had the military camp here. And I'd also like to talk about what's left of the military camp. There are some aspects of the military camp that are still present today. You can see if you walk around the area. So let's get started. So for those who aren't aware of the fact that we had a military camp here in Newmarket, back in the 1930s, as most people know, the war clouds were over Western Europe. Germany had invaded Czechoslovakia in March of 1939 and had overrun Poland the same year. The fate of Britain appeared to be in jeopardy, and Canada, on the September the 8th of 39, voted to involve Canada in the Second World War and come to the aid of Great Britain. Now, I think most people know that Canada at that time, back in the 1930s, Canada had very strong ties, both politically, emotionally, and financially with Great Britain. Our population locally certainly was predominantly Anglo-Saxon, and also I think it's worth keeping in mind that we had just gone through the Great Depression, so the 1930s found an awful lot of people unemployed here in Newmarket, and a lot of local businesses were in a great deal of difficulty making ends meet. The Department of National Defense established several recruiting depots across the country, and Toronto was named Military District Number 2. They set up a military camp at the exhibition known as the Manning Pool, where recruits were dispensed to the various training camps across the country. There were, in fact, 39 Army camps established across Canada for elementary training. Elementary training would be the being inducted into the Army, getting you prepared for Army life, and then you would be channeled from there onto a specialty camp, be it the Air Force, the Navy, or the Army. When it was announced in midsummer of 1940 that the Army training camps were being formed, the Newmarket Council decided that there was an opportunity there to solve a couple of their existing problems, and so they very quickly applied to be a site of an Army camp. The argument at that point was that the Army camp would bring a huge economic benefit to the area and solve many of our labor problems, put our local people to work. Deputy Reeve Joseph Vale and Solicitor Norman L. Matthews went to Ottawa and met with our representative in Ottawa, who was able at that time to get them an interview with the administrator of wartime price and trade. And through that, the application was made. And the decision was made in Ottawa that Newmarket would be an excellent place for us to locate a military camp, and the process proceeded. On August 1st of 1940, a bylaw was passed by council to lease town properties to the Department of National Defense for the duration of the war and for 6 months after the declaration of peace. This area included 16 acres of Connaught Gardens on the north side of Shrigley Street and another 16 acres where the Fairgrounds was located. An additional 20 acres were acquired from Albert and Herbert Stickwood, whose farm was on the south side of Shrigley Street, east of the Fairgrounds. Now, I should mention a little bit about Connaught Gardens. Many people don't know what Connaught Gardens represented here in Newmarket. Connaught Gardens was an interesting project, one of the very first ideas for a subdivision. The land was purchased, and the lots were staked out, and things look pretty good. It cost you $50 to buy a piece of land, which today is very inexpensive, and they had put in a lot of the facilities for those lots. But unfortunately, this project came at the beginning of the Depression, and during the Depression, the project bottomed out, and the whole project was put aside. So all this land that had been cleared was sitting there vacant. So it was an excellent opportunity for the town to take over the land and to offer it to the Ministry of Defense. So we have a total of 52 acres that were allotted to the military. Provisions were made for a water supply, for sewers, for hydro and telephone services, and were part of the negotiations that took place between the National Defense and the Town Council. On August 15th, 1940, Newmarket was selected as a site for a basic training camp and designated as Training Camp number 29 in Military District number 2. With an expenditure of $300,000 to train 1,000 men each month with a staff of 200 officers and instructors. The training concentrated on physical exercise, square drills, gas training, and the proper use of a musket. Work commenced immediately with 300 local men employed to build 30 buildings in 10-hour shifts, 6 days a week. So anybody with a hammer and a saw could apply for the job. The job was paying 55 cents an hour, but they did pay up to $1.10 an hour for skilled labor. This is important to understand because, as I said, we had massive unemployment here in Newmarket. The employment that did exist, the people were working for next to nothing. And so the opportunity to get full-time labor or a full-time job paying 55 cents an hour, and if you were one of those people who had some sort of skill, you could get up to $1.10 an hour. So it was a real boom for the unemployment here in Newmarket. As I said, people were working for next to nothing. Statistics show that the prevailing rate per hour in town was 25 to 35 cents an hour when work was available. By mid-September, the first officers moved in under Lieutenant Colonel Harkness with a provost corps of a sergeant and 6 men to supervise the Army requirements. On September 26th, the first group arrived here in Newmarket. It was made up, as I said, of 100 men, and they arrived by train and paraded down Main Street and over to the camp. Now, I think at that time Newmarket was a relatively small town, and 1,000 people coming in at a time each month, along with the staff that was running the military camp, was a huge increase in our population. It made up a large percentage of the people around. As well, all these people had to buy supplies. They wanted to buy things to send home. Of course, by this time, Newmarket downtown was having a hard time, and I would argue that had it not been for the military camp establishing themselves here in Newmarket, many of those businesses would have gone bankrupt. In fact, there are pictures showing a number of the businesses that we remember, but many of those businesses had signs in their window indicating that they were contemplating moving or shutting down. So this was very important. It created a real need for their services, and in fact, I think kept them financially alive during the Second World War. Eventually, there were 45 buildings that were constructed, including a large drill hall, barracks for 1,000 men, officers' quarters, cookhouses, recreation halls, a hospital, a quartermaster store, canteens, chapels. A number of buildings were actually built. And one of the interesting things about the building of the camp was that it was absolutely remarkable how quickly they were able to build the camp. They got a little bit of a late start, but they were able to build the camp and have everything ready for when the soldiers began to arrive. So I think that is fairly impressive. So as I said, recruiting and enlistments were at a rate of 1,000 men a month, and they arrived usually by train. So back then, I remember in doing my oral history interviews, people telling me that they can remember going down either as a child or sometimes as an adult down to the train station to watch the men arriving. I guess it was quite a spectacle to see the men arrive by train, get off the train and march from the train station on Davis Drive over to the Army camp. This continued steadily for the duration of the war. So every month we got another 1,000 men. And those 1,000 men that had been here for the month moved on or were dispersed to other training camps depending on what their specialty was going to be in the war. When peace was declared to end the hostilities, the camp ceased to function and went into limbo only to prepare for its closing. On January 27th, 1946, it was announced that the camp would be closed finally at the end of March. On being vacated, an auction sale took place in July, disposing of all the furniture and the equipment. The war period ended the terrible decade of the 1930s and introduced the transition into a completely new lifestyle in Newmarket mid-century, and changed the makeup of our town. Now, as I said, Newmarket was primarily Anglo-Saxon, definitely primarily white, and we didn't have too many people from other parts of the world here in Newmarket. However, when the recruits began arriving here in Newmarket, we, of course, got a real cross-section of Canada's population. So we've got a lot of people who were not Anglo-Saxon. We got a lot of people with color or of color. And this was definitely good for Newmarket. I've interviewed several people, and people have made the comment that Newmarket grew up during the Second World War, and it was primarily because of all of these new people entering into our community and forcing us really to move out of our colonial past and into the present and preparing for the future. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that you had 1,000 men who were descending, as I say, every month, and they needed some place for recreation. And so you could still head over to Millard Avenue, and you can see the location of what was at that time called Club 14. And it was a club, an after-hours club that was established to give the people who were being trained here in Newmarket an opportunity for entertainment. This also provided additional labor need in order to staff Club 14. For those people who read my articles, you will remember I wrote an article on the big band scene here in Newmarket, and several of the local big bands found working at Club 14, entertaining the people at Club 14. Now, the other thing, and we talked about this in an earlier episode of the History Hound Presents, Newmarket was dry during this period, so we had no alcohol. However, because of the fact that we had a military camp, the people on the military camp were allowed to drink, and so the only place that had alcohol in town was the military camp, which I think is kind of interesting. Welcome back to the History Hound Presents. So before the break, we were talking about the fact that because we were in a situation of being under prohibition here in Newmarket, the only place that you could drink was the military camp. So you would find, of course, a lot of the locals would try and take the opportunity to visit the canteen at the military camp in order to get a drink. Also, it's important to understand that this Club 14 that we talked about before the break did not serve alcohol. So primarily the soldiers would go there for the live entertainment, for the dancing, the opportunity, let's face it, to meet local women, and they would go for the food, because one of the big draws of Camp 14 was home cooking. As well, I should mention, and this is a story that I got from my grandparents and my mother, the community also opened their homes to the soldiers, and so it was a regular occurrence that residents would invite soldiers home for a Sunday dinner, or maybe off to a picnic someplace. Part of this, I think, as it was explained to me in oral history interviews that I've done, part of the reason for this is that a large number of the boys from Newmarket were off in Europe fighting, and local families thought that they hoped that their boys were being taken care of by the local people over there, and so they thought it was their responsibility to take care of the boys that were here at the military camp. And so, you know, it was quite a common occurrence to see them, the soldiers around town, and in visiting the local families where they were included in the family events. There were a couple of things I mentioned before that Newmarket had to learn during this period. One of them was to be more accommodating to people who were different than most of us here during that period. We had several instances where the soldiers who were of color would be within the town and were not perhaps treated as nicely as they could have been. This was partly because of the fact that Newmarket had a small, if not non-existent, population of people of color, and I think the people of Newmarket just weren't used to seeing people of color on the streets of Newmarket. We had officers who were of color, and I think that helped a lot in the mixing of people and our education here in Newmarket. I think also too, if you take a look at it, the interesting point for our military camp, in most military camps, they used to create separate colored regiments, shall we say. They used to separate the people, but here in Newmarket, because of the fact that we had officers of color, we didn't do that. So in our training, the people were mixed. One of the things that they had to do, of course, during the time that the men were here is entertain them, find some way to entertain them. And one of the things that they decided to do was to encourage the men to get involved in sports. And we have a couple of interesting stories that come out of that. Those of you who are hockey fans will remember that during the Second World War, many of the NHL players joined the armed forces, feeling that it was their responsibility to serve. And some of those people joined the various sporting groups from the various camps. And so I'm told that during the time of the military camp, people used to flock out to watch the sporting events that took place, particularly the hockey and the baseball, because famous, or yeah, I guess you'd say famous athletes were taking part in the sports that was leagues. One of those people was a young man from Hamilton who it turned out was a boxer. I think he was just an amateur boxer when he came to Newmarket, but one of the things that was unique about him is that he was equally good with his left hand and his right hand. He honed his ability here in Newmarket. He competed against, first of all, area military camps, and then because of how good he was, he fought against military camps from other provinces, remained unbeaten, and I would say probably would have been a star boxer. Sadly, like many of the young men who went to our military camps, he died in Europe, and yeah, I think that's very, very sad. We also have the situation of the Conacher brothers, Lionel and Charlie. Now, a lot of people will remember Charlie Conacher because he played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But Charlie Conacher was an athlete that stood above everybody else in almost every sports discipline. If you take a look at the history of sport in Canada, you will see that he was voted the best athlete of the first 50 years of the 19th century here in Canada. He excelled in, as I say, professionally in a number of sports. He played professional baseball, professional football with the Argos. He played, as I said, for the Leafs. He was of Olympic caliber athlete as well. The story that they tell about him is that he was here to play baseball against the Newmarket military camp. And of course, the Newmarket military camp believed that Mr. Conacher was a ringer, and so complained of the fact that he was allowed to play with everybody else. And as the story goes, he said he flipped the bat over, holding the barrel of the bat and batting with the knob, and said, "Will this suffice?" People thought, "Oh, this is good. I mean, he's just going to try and hit with a knob." And to their surprise, he hit a number of huge home runs using the knob of his bat. So he became somewhat of a legend here in Newmarket for that feat. I think the other thing that we should talk about is that during the Second World War in the military camp, because we had all these people coming and going, a number of people found that, or a number of the soldiers decided that they liked the area and they would kind of like to come back after the war. And we had a large number of them come back and make Newmarket their home. So I think that's pretty special too, and I think it's a tribute to how well we treated the soldiers when they were here. Welcome back to our program. We'll take a look at the ending of in this segment, the ending of the war and what happened to the military camp. So, as I said in the last segment, the war came to an end. The military camp was deemed to be redundant, and the town decided that what it would do is it would repossess the leased 32 acres that they had made available to the Department of Defense, and they would acquire 20 more acres and all of the buildings that were on the site from the War Assets Corporation. They paid $34,700 to get all of this back. So now we've got this huge area in the center of town, which is just sitting there empty. Within a few days of them passing the bylaw to purchase everything back, they sold part of this purchase for $25,500 to a gentleman named John W. Bowser, who was a land developer, I guess for lack of a better word, an entrepreneur. And he purchased the part of the military camp, which was really made up of the area around the Fairgrounds. This area was located on the south side of Shrigley Street and included all 9 barracks. Each unit had been the quarters for 136 servicemen and comprised 2 long frame huts, the dimensions being 24 feet by 100 feet. And they were joined in the center section by a wall where the toilets and showers had been located. So it kind of looked like a large H. Mr. Bowser modified these H huts along with my uncle, George Loosby, who did the design work and the engineering work, and with the idea that they would convert them to residences. Now, I said that there are some of the facilities from the military camp that still exist, and this is one of the part of the infrastructure that still exists. If you walk in that area, you will see a housing that was, in fact, at one time military barracks. They have been converted into semi-detached houses, and so I would suggest that you may want to, at some point, go for a walk in that area and take a look at these old barracks and the houses that they became. So essentially what they did was they took the center portion out of the unit, and then they adapted them into bungalows that were 24 feet by 35 feet. And there were 36 of these dwellings that were created. The parade area between the barracks were turned into streets. These streets still exist today. You have Newton Street, Arthur Street, Lowell Avenue, and Muriel Avenue. Laurel Avenue was not extended to Gorham Street until January of 1951. But most of these areas, this area was subdivided into existing streets. The houses were all sold as soon as they were built and they were complete. Their conversion was completed in 1947, so they were immediately gobbled up. The cost being $5,000 a house. The officers' quarters on the north side of Shrigley Street was converted to into a variety of buildings. Some of them still exist today, some don't. Today we still have the curling club on the east end of the property, and we have, of course, the Legion Hall, which was the officers' mess. It was converted into the Legion Hall when the Legion was established in 1946. Some of the buildings were moved to other locations in Newmarket, and some of the buildings were leased to the to various local businesses. In 1970, the buildings, most of the buildings were demolished and the land parceled to provide 11 building lots. And again, you will see, particularly in the area around the Legion, new properties that were built. Keep in mind that these at one time were military buildings, and as I said, were demolished in 1970. During the war, the quartermaster stores, the NCO mess hall and offices in the southeast corner of Shrigley and Muro Street was the primary cluster of buildings. The area where Prince Charles School was built was also part of the military camp. So part of that land was the military camp, and part of it was property of the Stickwood brothers, and it was erected in 1950. During this period of time, the population in Newmarket rose from 4,000 to 5,000. And so there was a real need for a new public school, hence the building of Prince Charles School. And this was the first new school that was built in Newmarket since 1923, when Stuart Scott had been built on Lawrence Avenue. The parade ground, which had been used for army training purposes, was converted into a park. Many of you who grew up or who had children who grew up in Newmarket will probably remember them having soccer and baseball facilities at the Fairgrounds. So it was turned over to the town, and they in turn turned it into a playground. Now, the former Glenville Dairy was destroyed by fire on April 7th of 1990. And the bowling alley, which was demolished in June of 1991, they were, in fact, two buildings that had been moved from the old military camp over to Davis Drive. So as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, a number of the buildings were repurposed around town. So there really wasn't that much waste, I guess, from our experiment with the military camp. After the military camp was over, we reacquired the land, which we turned into housing, or we turned into a public park. The buildings were repurposed And I would say probably the town came out ahead in this deal. Now, who are the heroes that come out of this tale? Well, I think probably Mayor Boyd, who was a local doctor here. He was also the mayor during this period. He was the one that realized that it would be a terrific idea for us to apply to get the military camp. He realized that it would be a huge boom both in employment and in finances or financially for the town to have the camp located here. It was his initiative to apply for the camp. So I think that that certainly puts him in a situation of being rated as one of our top mayors we've had in this particular town. I think the other hero or heroes that come out of here is all those people who trained here in Newmarket. You know, a large number of them never came back to Canada. They obviously did their training here. They went off to be for specialized training, and then went over to Europe. And as I say, a large number of them didn't come back. So I think we should always have to keep that in mind. Never ever forget that. Anyway, that concludes, I guess, our look at the Newmarket military camp. I hope that if you didn't know that they existed, that you do now, and I hope you have a bit of a feel for the benefits of having a military camp, how it changed Newmarket. Obviously, it helped us financially. It provided jobs for our local workforce. I think it dragged us into the present. Newmarket was a little bit backward before the Second World War. It certainly brought new people and new faces to Newmarket, which I think is always a good idea. And I think we should have a great deal of pride in the fact that we contributed locally to the war effort in such a direct way. I hope you join us next time for one of our presentations. Until then, happy hunting for history, for local history, and I hope many of you will be encouraged to become a local history hound. Take care.